Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for a worship the Mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the full council, this evening of the 6th of October 2021. I will just update you on some housekeeping arrangements for the meeting this evening. There are no scheduled tests, so in the event of a fire alarm, we will need to evacuate the building. The fire exits open automatically and they are clearly marked. Please leave through the nearest exit to your seat. The muster point is in the car park by the Bowls Club. Toilets are located through either set of double doors behind me, then turn left, keep going until you reach the clearly signposted facilities. Please use the nearest doors if you need to access them during the meeting. There is one entrance and one exit for the duration of the meeting, but when the meeting ends, please use the doors nearest to you when you leave. Lastly, when speaking, please ensure that you stand to speak so that you are clearly heard by other members and members of the public. And please ensure that you use your microphone. These proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the council, but will anyone else be recording or filming? I'm only asking so that everybody knows what's going on and what's happening. Did I see a hand go up? Ah, yes, Councillor Mackay, I was looking for you. Councillor Mackay, there are no other hands going up. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the main agenda then. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from Councillors Cox, Eves, Margaret Rose and Councillor Wilby. Are there any other apologies that we're aware of? Councillor Perry?
Councillor Bryce.
Oh, thank you. That's Councillor Bryce. That can be noted, please. Thank you. Item 2. Are there any applications for dispensations? I'm asking our lawyer.
I have had none, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Number 3. Disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures of Are there any disclosures of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests by members? No, I see none. Thank you. Are there any disclosures by officers? I see none. Item 4, lobbying. Now, given that matters to be discussed this evening, it's likely that there has been an awful lot of lobbying. So can I ask that on this particular occasion, are there any members who have not been lobbied? Who have not been lobbied? If so, please indicate. I see no such indication. Thank you very much, members. We have all been lobbied. Item 5, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. Well, I'm going to move that all items are taken in public, except that there is a working draft statements of common ground. They are attached as exempt Appendix 4 in yellow papers to the report submitted to the committee the other evening, Strategic Planning and Infrastructure. As there are Part 1 summaries of each of these statements within the Local Plan Review report, they can be discussed during open session. I believe that we can reference those sufficiently without the need to enter into closed session. But I do ask that members are careful not to refer to any of the detail contained within those yellow pages. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Lovely. Thank you very much. Item 6, Mayor's announcements. Tonight's meeting is of such importance that I do not wish to detract from it. Therefore, there will be no Mayor's announcements this evening. Item 7, Petitions. I believe there are no petitions this evening. That's correct? Yes, thank you. Item 8, Question and Answer session for members of the public. I have received notification that Mr. Stuart Jeffrey wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Over to you, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you. Over the 2022 to 2037 period, the Council proposes that 17,355 homes are built. Given that the Council agrees that there is a climate emergency, can the Council tell me how much carbon will be emitted in the construction of these homes?
Over to you, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, for your question. The Council does not hold data on the amount of carbon that will be emitted in the construction of future homes that are contained in the local plan review. The level of housing growth contained in the local plan review is in fact set out by government using a standard methodology that applies across England. If the authority does not meet the needs that are calculated by government, it risks failing its local plan review, losing control of key planning decisions as sites are refused by council but simply granted on appeal by a government inspector, and being put into special measures by government. The local plan review not only seeks to meet required housing need with associated infrastructure investment, but contains policies and proposals to protect and enhance designated landscapes and wildlife designations, and also helps to address the climate change and biodiversity emergency that has been declared by the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Mr. Jeffrey, do you wish to ask a supplementary question to the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
Yes, please. Given that you can't answer that question, and that the Council has declared a climate emergency, and the definition of emergency is something that's happening and needs some immediate attention, why is the Council simply paying lip service to the unfolding climate emergency rather than taking decisive action to secure a future for us all?
Over to you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you once again, Mr. Jeffrey. In response to the answer that I gave you last week, this Council seeks not to have any particular climate change agenda, but to make climate change part of every decision that is made within this Council. And I think that that should answer your question. That is what we are doing in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. I've received notification that Mr. Ian MacDonald wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Mr. MacDonald, if he is there. Do we not have Mr. MacDonald here this evening? Apparently not. Bear with me. I think that neatly, therefore, moves us on to questions from council members. So, therefore, I have received notification that Councillor Tom Sands wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Sands, are you with us?
Thank you. Given this Council's reliance on garden communities to form the central case for the local plan's success, could their removal by an independent inspector lead the Borough Council's local plan being thrown out and this Council having to begin the process again?
Councillor Cooper.
Madam Mayor, thank you once again, and thank you, Councillor Sams. The local plan review spatial strategy includes garden community proposals. As you know, given the level of growth that the Council is required to plan for and the opportunities that they present, including for providing much needed infrastructure, Their removal would therefore mean that the local planning authority would have to reconsider its approach, including the potential of reverting to a dispersal approach, but this would require significant work and potentially a new evidence base. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Sams, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee, arising out of your original question or its reply?
Yes, I do, but can I confirm, the acoustics in this hall are terrible, and I couldn't hear virtually everything that you said because there's a little bit of chair shuffling around, and I don't suppose anyone there could hear an awful lot either. So, is there any possibility that when people speak, they could speak clearly and closely more to the microphones? Because I have to be honest, Mr. Cooper, never heard a word of it.
Well, look, may I respectfully suggest, would it be possible for you, please, Councillor Cooper, to repeat your response? And that's for everybody's benefit, Councillor Sams. Is that okay? Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. You make a good point. I fear that I will have to say a lot this evening, and some people may wish to hear me. I will repeat the answer. The local plan review's spatial strategy includes garden community proposals, as you are well aware. Given the level of growth that the Council is required to plan for and the opportunities that they present, including for providing much needed infrastructure, their removal would therefore mean that the local planning authority would have to reconsider its approach, including the potential of reverting to the dispersal strategy. However, that would require significant work on a new evidence base. Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing that, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Sams, did you want to ask a supplementary?
Thank you. I caught most of that, but so can I confirm, I think from your answer, that you agree their acceptance is essential to the plan's viability? I think that's what...
Yes, for the record, absolutely, their acceptance is vital. Thank you.
All right, I take it there's no supplementary, so I'm going to say that I've received notification that Councillor Janetta Sams wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Janetta.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Heathlands proposal in its present form is seen by many to be unacceptable for inclusion within the consultation through its lack of substance, detail and lack of infrastructural certainty on so many fronts. Do these matters give you any cause for concern? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper?
No. Since the consultation on the Local Plan Review Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches document, a significant amount of additional evidence has been provided in support of the Heathlands Garden proposal. The evidence is considered to be proportionate and sufficient to demonstrate its deliverability, viability and sustainability. For the scheme at this stage, works will also continue on the Heathlands Garden community proposals, including through the production of a proposed supplementary planning document that would set out further details of the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Sams, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee, arising out of your original question or his reply?
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. If you are found to be incorrect in your assumption, what will happen?
Councillor Cooper.
I have absolutely every confidence that I am not incorrect in this assumption, and this has been discussed at a high level with officers within the Council, and we have sought independent advice on this matter. Therefore, I'm comfortable that I am not incorrect in my assumption, and I certainly do hope that that does give you some reassurance at the very least. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper. That brings us on, as I can see no further questions from members. Item 10, oral report of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee from the 4th of October. Before I call upon Councillor Cooper to move the recommendations of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee relating to the local plan review, we have 5 members of the public and 2 parish representatives who have registered to address the Council. Now, I therefore move that Council Procedure Rule 16.1 be suspended for this meeting only to enable the total time for public speakers to be extended from 12 minutes to 15 minutes. This will allow all 5 members of the public to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes each. In addition to the 15 minutes, the 2 parish representatives will have a maximum of 3 minutes each, in line with Procedure Rule 16.2. Now, do I have a second to my thank you, Councillor Burton? Is that agreed, members? Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I think let's just fire away. I now call upon the public speakers. You each have 3 minutes each to address the council, and I believe, is it Mrs. Kate Hammond or Mr. Steve Healy? Ms. Kate Hammond. The floor is yours, Kate.
Is this on? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, members and councillors. Save Our Heathlands campaign group has been attending meetings, lobbying councillors and telling the council the hard truth on why Heathlands does not work for 2 years. We chose Save Our Heathlands because it shortens to SOUL, standing for Soul of Our Countryside, Soul of Our Community. So why does Maidstone Council want to destroy Lenham's soul? If Heathlands is such a great plan, then I ask members, why are you not suggesting that Heathlands be built in your backyard? Councillor Gooch famously said to me when I suggested this to her, "Oh no, it would give me sleepless nights." Well, what do you think this bad plan is doing to the residents of Lenham and surrounding villages? Councillor Burton, Leader of the Council, what about you? If garden settlements are the way forward for Maidstone, why are you not supporting the garden settlement plan for Marden, which is the most shovel-ready to go ahead? It has been rated top of the bunch by your own independent consultants. Councillor Gregan Clark, all the points you brought up on Monday's Spy for why Leeds Langley should be taken out of the plan, Heathlands is that and worse. So why are you not asking for Heathlands to be taken out of the plan? Councillor Webb, rather than telling residents to be quiet, maybe you should listen to them. They are trying to tell you the truth, or do you not care about the truth? Councillor Mumford, if you are so worried about your 5-year housing land supply, then why are you supporting a plan where one of your biggest allocations is undeliverable? Councillor Russell, you have campaigned against garden settlements and said in your election literature that you are passionate about preventing overdevelopment in our unique villages. So why are you not passionate about overdevelopment outside of Marden? Councillor Garton, sometimes you need to take a breath before writing to residents. You came across as a hypocrite when there's still a video circulating online telling residents in 2015 that Lenham is an idyllic medieval village that should be preserved and not become Maidstone's housing dumping ground. Lib Dems, you say you're about protecting the environment and dealing with climate change. Why are you supporting a plan that removes over 1,400 acres of greenfield land? Conservatives, your leader was telling this council only last week that climate change should be at the core of every decision this council makes. How does that sit with the decision you're about to take tonight on the local plan? 19 new councillors were elected in May of this year. The majority, if all, campaigned on protecting the environment and green space. You need to honour that commitment tonight to residents who voted for you. We've heard over and over again how it's not this council's fault. It is because national government targets. But this council cannot blame national government for bad decisions and bad planning. Tonight you have a responsibility to not let this bad plan progress any further. Vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't detect a question there, but I do think you made a fair statement. Councillor, I'm not so sure that there is anything to answer there. We were all involved. I take your point, but you made a statement. that's fine, thank you. Okay, Kate, thank you. I tell you what, before we go any further, I understand that we've had complaints about the sound quality. People who are online, as well as possibly in this hall, are not able to hear properly. Now, to overcome this, members, may I suggest that we suspend Rule 27.1 of our Constitution, which requires us to stand when we speak, if we can remain seated. But would I have your agreement, councillors, that you can remain seated and that we remove that particular standing requirement in the Constitution? Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed, members. I now call upon Mrs. Sue Harwood for your question. The floor is yours, Mrs. Harwood.
Good evening. I gave this speech to the SPI committee on Monday, but sadly they failed to care enough about its content to remove Lidsing Garden Village from the local plan. So I'm going to read it again. I'm a founding member of the Against Lidsing Garden Development Facebook group. The group was formed in December last year to help inform local people about the outrageous plan for 2,000 homes in Lidsing. No one in the area knew about this until November-December, not even the residents of Lidsing. My parents live at Abbey Court Farm in Lidsing. In contradiction to the developer's claims that he was the sole owner, some of their land is included in this scheme. It was included without their knowledge or consent, and I have copies of emails that they sent to Councillor Martin Cox in December proving this. This whole plan has caused my parents, who are in their mid-70s, a great deal of distress. They were both born and bred in Lidsing and Bredhurst, and my dad's family has lived at the farm for 6 generations. My great-granddad and his father worked for Colonel Templar, who tested hot air balloons for the military in the late 1800s in Lidsing. Indeed, the field where the testing was carried out is still called Balloon Hole today. This history will be lost forever, as this is one of the fields that are set to be concreted over. My parents don't want the houses to be built. They just want to be left alone to see out their days in their bungalow on the family farm, which my dad has worked on for 7 days a week for the last 60 years. They didn't want to sign any agreement, but felt they didn't have a choice and eventually gave in. They were told that if they didn't sign, their land would be unworkable because of the decade of construction works around it, so they would lose their only source of income. They were told their land would be worthless, and if they didn't sign, they wouldn't be able to sell it afterwards. Also, they had the threat of compulsory purchase over their heads, which they've already experienced twice in the past, when the M2 motorway was built and then widened. My elderly parents have been subjected to bullying tactics by this developer. It is certainly immoral and unscrupulous. My dad's mental well-being has been so severely affected that he can't actually talk about this without breaking down in tears. My mum has no idea what it is she has signed or agreed to. I hope that you became councillors for the borough of Maidstone because you believed you could improve and help the area and residents. My parents weren't strong enough to stand up to this manipulative developer. Please be strong for them and do the right thing. Don't just toe the party line, vote against destroying the area. These are real people who will suffer if you agree to this. Do you really want your holistic garden community built by intimidation? Please also be aware that the Lidsing application has been reported to the Serious Fraud Office and we are currently supplying further evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Howard. I now call upon Mrs. Nicola Carr.
Take glasses off, I can see them. Okay, so I found it very difficult to put into 3 minutes how I feel about where I live, and there's so many aspects to cover, but I can only hope that I do it justice. What's the definition of environment? The surroundings or condition in which a person, animal or plant lives or operates. I'm pleased to be part of a community that care for where we live. We ensure that the area is kept clean, tidy, and we're proud of retaining its heritage. We've planted hedging, trees and created wildlife areas and have the privilege of seeing all kinds of native wildlife on our doorstep because of this. The development would mean this would be replaced with noise and pollution from vehicles from 3,000 plus houses. What a transformation, but not a good one. A transformation that I would find hard to explain to my niece and nephew, who have also committed to doing the right thing to the environment and are heavily involved in the planting and preservation of the area. Many generations locally care for the land and the woodland, and this would all be for nothing. There's a lot of talk about infrastructure and the lack of it, and we need to consider the increase in health problems for those who live in the area, but also would add pressure to the non-existent infrastructure. Around 1 in 16 deaths is attributed to air pollution, around 40,000 deaths per year. When there's an incident on the motorway, the traffic that gridlocks the local area into Maidstone. What a great thought to add another several thousand cars to this chaos. We've also experienced localised flooding. At the top of the Downs, that's quite something, and I dread to see what it will be like when we cover another 125.5 hectares in concrete. Maidstone and Medway have announced climate emergencies in April 2019, and it is unfathomable to me to see how this can be acceptable in one area. Let's be practical, it's not just the 3,000 houses of vehicles, it's also the associated vehicles. 3,000 houses based on current NBC waste bins, residual, recycling, garden and food would create at least another 12,000 bin collections alone. Concerns about rat race through Bredhurst and Boxley, Is this a joke? Surely you can see that we'll all be at a standstill. There'll be no rat run. We'll be all trying to find our way off our driveways. We'll be following your plans that says leave your vehicles switched off. We'll be waiting to leave our driveways. We won't be able to drive up and down Boxley Road. We'll be trying to find our bicycle to just go down the road. Animals and plants also cause lidsing their home, and they can't be ignored in this decision making. Farmers and animals, bats, skylarks, buzzards, owls, bees, foxes are all to name but a few of that use the land locally. But I can't see the wildlife and houses having the same alignment. Bredhurst and Lidsing have a very high population of horses that are ridden on the roads and the livery businesses that are there associated with them. They are also considered in the plan, maybe not. The business would be lost along with the regular cyclists and walkers. In conclusion, what is the point in asking us to maintain habitats, our environment, in line with your policies and strategies if you decide to desecrate an area adjacent to the AONB? Summarised, the situation is heartbreaking. Please consider what you're doing. It affects a lot of people.
Thank you, Mrs. Carr. I now call upon Mr. Chris Hawkins.
Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Throughout the process of the Council formulating their emerging local plan, I've had the pleasure of sitting through more SPI and full Council meetings than I genuinely care to remember. One thing that has struck home, though, is that I've not once heard anyone refer to this as a good plan. There's been a lot of discussion about its flaws and a lot of discussion about process, but no debate upon how it positively contributes towards making the borough better. There's been no debate about better alternative sites. It appears to me that the consensus is a bad plan is better than no plan, brought about by a fear of higher housing numbers and a lack of housing supply. 2 points. Firstly, the spectre of higher housing numbers has passed. The need to rush a plan through on that basis has now subsided. Secondly, a bad plan is likely to result in a lack of housing land supply in any event. The large development at Heathlands and Lidsing will not deliver until much later in the plan period. There are huge numbers in the town centre exclusively on occupied sites, one of which is about to open as a new supermarket. They will not come forward in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. This plan, as written, is likely to result in a swift fall in housing land supply if by chance it's adopted. And herein lies the biggest problem. You are being asked to agree a planning strategy for the whole borough without knowing the transport impacts, without knowing whether the Leeds-Langley bypass is wanted, where it would go, how many houses it would need, and perhaps most importantly, whether it's actually viable and deliverable. You're being asked to agree the principle of development with and adjacent to an AONB without having been given the opportunity to review the response from the AONB unit. You are being asked to agree the principle of building 5,000 new homes and 5,000 new jobs on a site where you have no idea whether a station can be delivered. You are being asked to agree the principle of allowing all of that traffic onto the A20 without knowing its impact. You're being asked to agree a plan that requires 0% affordable housing on the Barracks site, the most sustainable site in the plan. This isn't an aspirational plan, it's a political plan. It's been prepared in haste and does not reflect the concerns of the many thousands of local residents who have taken the time to write to officers and members. It doesn't reflect the many professionals employed by the Council and statutory consultees. I would respectfully ask that members think very carefully about how you intend to shape the borough for the next 17 years, because your vote this evening does exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. One moment, please, members. I would like to very temporarily adjourn the meeting for a health and safety issue. One moment, please. There will now be a short adjournment for about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask please that you retake your seats. I think the meeting is about to restart. Thank you.
Members and members of the public, thank you very much indeed for your patience. One of our councillors insisted on coming here because she knew that it was an extremely serious meeting that we're having this evening, but she has now been just taken to hospital. But thank you very much for your patience. I think we got up to Ms. Helen Baker was next. Thank you. I'm sorry we had to keep you waiting, but the floor is yours. I'm sorry, I should have said I hereby resume the meeting. I beg your pardon. Ms. Baker.
My family home of 40 plus years is in Lidsing, a small hamlet of about 13 properties. The area of Lidsing is an ALLI, and we found out about this proposal on Facebook. The planners had clearly spent some considerable time concocting their plans, yet shamefully did not speak to the few people it initially affected. Maidstone received nearly 2,000 objections, and the councillors will have received voluminous emails. Lidsing Garden Community will operate as an urban extension to the Medway area. 674 states there is little connection between Lordswood and Hempstead. There is no desire locally to connect them. Medway has long maintained a strategic gap and does not wish to become an urban sprawl, which will happen under Maidstone's plan. 675 states a small AONB will be required for the M2 spur. The impact of this will not be minimal. The area in question is a large flat field and it will be impossible to screen it. The very designation of AONB should be enough to prevent this part of your proposal from proceeding, yet it seems your planners can ignore it whilst using it as a reason to decline building in other areas of the borough. Neighbouring authorities, developers and residents will be watching your actions very carefully. 677 of your draft plan states Maidstone recognises many aspects of this site have at least as much of an impact on Medway as Maidstone. This proposal will be an unmitigated disaster for Medway. The main landowner is also trying to build 2 further developments along Capstan Valley, creating 1,100 homes. Add this to your proposal and Medway gets an additional 3,500 homes. Assuming 2 cars per household, 7,000 extra cars and potentially 12,000 extra people. Maidstone will not feel this on a daily basis. Medway most certainly will, which is why they've spent years fighting these proposals. Your plan notes provision for a new primary school and employment, but the earmarked areas are in Medway. Contribution to a new secondary school and cycling walking routes in Capstan Valley, again, Medway. So your planners put gloss on their proposals without having any capacity to deliver. The plan states measures to prevent rat runs. 7,000 additional vehicles will filter into existing roads, all with immediate pinch points, which you have no ability to or capacity to ease. People travelling to Maidstone will still go via Boxley, so unless you build a bypass around Boxley, you cannot prevent this. Boxley is in an AONB, but you're setting a precedent at Bredhurst. Several other parties own land proposed to be used in this development, and all were opposed to it. We understand they've now signed something consenting to use of their land. Under freedom of information, it will be very interesting to see whether they were strongly advised to take independent legal advice. Being told your land will be unworkable, your farm will be worthless, and you will have no future is a terrible way to treat your constituents. My own father has given up, his voice ignored in favour of planners and developers. Many of your councillors at the SPI on Monday mentioned hard decisions need to be made. If Lidsing was in your ward, would this be a hard decision? Not one of you here today would want this environmental destruction and overdevelopment on your doorstep. Councillors at the SPI were advised not to make any amendments to the plan, which begs the question, what is that committee's purpose, as it seems the unelected planning officers are pulling the strings. Your constituents have elected you democratically to represent them. In respect of Lidsing, imagine this is your ward. Do the right thing, listen to your constituents and reject this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Baker. I now call upon the parish representatives. You have 3 minutes each to address the council. First of all, Councillor Peter Cooling, Vice Chairman, Maidstone Calc.
I speak as Maidstone Calc's Chair, Geraldine Brown, could not be here this evening. Reg 19 draft is hamstrung by the government-mandated housing requirement. We lobby for reduction, as did Borough and County Councillors and Kent MPs. The so-called mutant algorithm was killed off, but we're still left with an annual requirement some 50% higher than in the current local plan, and there are sanctions for non-compliance. This review process is impossible to get right to everyone's satisfaction. However, it is essential that we maintain a 5 years housing supply and achieve an adopted review. Otherwise, from late 2022, we will be exposed to unwelcome planning applications with much of our defences removed. Reg 18b attracted some 3,000 responses and Reg 19 invites more consultation. This draft certainly does not please everyone, but nor did the current local plan. That October 2017 plan, dispersed development throughout our borough, with an adverse impact on many villages and de facto major urban extensions along Sutton Road and Hermitage Lane, exacerbating many problems. However, to look after their general interests, our borough's residents needed a plan in 2017, and this review is now needed. Maidstone Calc cannot comment on any specific site, but we are clear that if a site is now removed, its planned homes must be made up elsewhere, so that the government-mandated housing requirement is met. However, we have two observations. While having no view on its merits, the Leeds-Langley corridor is safeguarded to provide homes to part-fund a relief road. In fact, some 4,000 homes over and above the government's mandated figure, but with the possibility of very substantial reduction if alternative funding is forthcoming. Reg 19's description of this policy is, to say the least, thin, and the logic is wanting. Either that road is being assumed and warrants inclusion of homes in the broad location partially to finance it, with some review sites then removed, or it is not assumed, in which case this policy should be removed. Which is it? The current policy raises blight on an area of local landscape value without offering full context and any balance. Secondly, some sites may have been removed since Reg 18.
Forgive me, Mr Cooling, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but I'm really not satisfied with the standard of that microphone. Is it that particular microphone that's faulty?
It's probably me.
I've got a feeling it's that microphone. Mr Cooling, would you mind moving to the other microphone? I mean, I could just about hear you, but it's not quite... But please continue. I think we got most of it. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, did you hear enough on the Leeds-Langley corridor? May I repeat that paragraph?
Please repeat it.
Right. I said we have two observations. However, while having no views on its merits, the Leeds-Langley corridor is safeguarded to provide homes to part-fund a relief road. In fact, some 4,000 homes over and above the government's mandated figure, but with a possibility of very substantial reduction if alternative funding is forthcoming. Reg 19's description of this policy is, to say the least, thin, and the logic is wanting. Either that road is being assumed and warrants inclusion of homes in the broad location partially to finance it, with some review sites then removed, or it is not assumed, in which case this policy should be removed. Which is it? The current policy raises blight on an area of local landscape value without offering full context and any balance. And secondly, some sites may have been removed since Reg 18b, which should not cause an issue at examination, but we wonder whether any have been added. If they have, that Reg 18b consultation process may be held to be flawed. That potential Reg 19 examination weakness should be eradicated. Finally, while this draft will attract much criticism, it is the result of extensive analysis and huge preparatory effort for which officers should be thanked, provided they now make every effort to improve it as a result of the imminent consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooling. Councillor Vanessa Jones, Chairman of Bredhurst Parish Council. The floor is yours. For 3 minutes.
Previous speakers have explained how their families in Lidzin have been bullied into signing over their land, how they've been told their houses will be devalued and farmland will be worthless, how their elderly parents didn't understand what they were signing. It seems some councillors merely wish to protect your own wards at the misery of others. Is this really how MBC operates? Are you so hell-bent on getting your plan approved at the expense of others? Your plan will destroy Bredhurst. We're a small village in the AONB with 170 houses. We simply cannot take the extra traffic from 2,000 more. Your plan states the proposed new junction to the M2 is a key element of the development, but that it could have a significant adverse effect on the area. Building a new motorway junction in the AONB is an utter disgrace. The designation is in place to protect the landscape. Your plan assumes people travelling to Maidstone will use the M2 and Bluebell Hill. They will not. They will use the winding country lanes through Bredhurst and Boxley as they do now. Our village can barely stand the amount of traffic on our roads. We cannot take any more. Your plan makes no mention of how the new residents will get to Rainham train station. They certainly won't use the ridiculous new road to the M2. They will travel through Bredhurst or Hempstead as they do now. The proposed new road runs only metres away from 2 Grade 2 listed buildings. Your plan states both buildings are likely to result in harm. It seems you do not respect national designations which protect our countryside or our historic buildings. Actually, the road's main purpose is not solely to access Lidzing, but to open up the area to join with Gibraltar Farm and East Hill, both developments which the proposer of Lidzing has been trying to get permission for years, but which Medway Council have steadfastly opposed. By approving Lidzing, you will be giving the green light for all 3 developments, so it's not 2,000 houses you are considering here tonight, but actually 3. Your plan has page after page of improvements for Medway. How does MBC have the audacity to tell another authority what is good for them? We understand Medway have informed you that they will not cooperate with you. They do not want your help, they do not want your houses, and neither does Bredhurst. We understand some councillors in the south of the borough often view North wards as the poor relations. If you vote this plan through tonight, you may find in future you no longer have safe Tory seats in the north, as voters could well look to other parties who actually listen to them. There are 3 seats in Boxley Ward which could easily change colour at the next election if you dump your houses in our area. We know other parties are sympathetic to our plight. You need to start listening to your residents, or your days of a Tory-led council could be numbered. The plan is very... 2 seconds. The plan is so very wrong in many, many ways. Don't approve it just because there's nothing else on the table. We need councillors with some backbone to say enough is enough. We need councillors who actually listen to residents. We need you to vote against the adoption of this local plan.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Prior to the debate, can I just say, before I call upon Councillor Cooper to move the recommendation, I'll just advise members that due to the technical nature of the subject, I will ask Councillor Cooper, as Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee, to respond in the first instance. That saves some time. Can I call upon you, Councillor Cooper, to move the recommendations of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members, tonight we face an important choice for the future of development in our borough. However, it is important to remember that our decision is not about whether or not we build. It isn't even about how many we build. Indeed, the government set these targets for us. Tonight's decision is about where we allocate sites and maintaining influence and control over the style of development and the much needed infrastructure which is essential to our borough. We have heard, and I think we all understand, the implications of delaying the local plan review that is the subject of tonight's agenda. And I would also remind colleagues that this plan was very much a co-production between parties, and that where choice existed, this was subject to discussion with members at local level. This seems a much better approach than the hours of borough-wide bartering that some members seem to be reminiscing about on Monday evening. I would like to cover some specific points that were raised by member colleagues on Monday from all sides of the political spectrum at the SPI committee. Firstly, the Invicta Barracks. The proposed number of units has been tested, including open space and historic parkland. However, final detail will be assessed as part of a supplementary planning document and ultimately a planning application. With regards to the Leeds-Langley corridor, it has been stressed that this is a high-level business case for the purposes of this Regulation 19 consultation. KCC has confirmed that they do not propose to pursue this as a standalone piece of highway infrastructure, and that rather they would support enabling development in this regard. The members' role in policies, I've mentioned the role in local site selections already, and I thank the members who actually did give the input and their local knowledge to this process. It is also worth mentioning at this point that at a SPI meeting in September, we agreed to commence work on a new DPD for design and sustainability within the borough. It was agreed that members will have a key role in deciding which policies are included in this document and how this document develops. We've had a number of comments on climate change, and in addition to the DPD that I've just mentioned, I can only stress again what was said on Monday around the way that building at the scale of garden communities allows us to provide infrastructure for leisure, walking, cycling infrastructure and public transport benefits where we need them and when we need them. Staying on the big sites in the plan, officers have pointed out that these will all be subject to supplementary planning documents, so there will be ample opportunity for both elected members and local communities to influence the finer details of these proposals as they progress. On infrastructure and community facilities, we heard concerns around a lack of progress in implementation. If we choose to continue with a dispersed pattern of development, which is what rejecting garden communities will inevitably lead to, this will get worse. However, if we grasp this opportunity to make sure that we can make sure that this is factored into the bigger schemes from the very outset, and it will enable us to focus more attention on the locations where this has proven more difficult. There were suggestions that this plan will fail. We were told by officers that they had taken advice from the planning inspectorates and high-level legal advice on 2 occasions at Regulation 18B and in preparation for this process. On all occasions, advice has been that the structure, coverage and process behind this raises no concerns. With regards to highways, the adopted local plan, the strategy was reliant on improvements to junctions shown to be congested by traffic modelling. Therefore, these junction improvements continue to be a priority in the local plan review and infrastructure delivery plan, with substantial CELEP and Section 106 funding being earmarked for capacity improvements, and there is the potential for community infrastructure levy monies to be spent to close any potential funding gaps. In regards to biodiversity, as per the MPPF, and to deliver on this Council's Biodiversity and Climate Change Emergency Action Plan, the Council will be commissioning a baseline study of where biodiversity needs the greatest improvement, and this work will form a critical reference point to the biodiversity elements of the forthcoming Design and Sustainability DPD. We have heard a great deal about the Lidsing and Heathland proposals from local members and from local communities, and I completely understand the emotions behind this. But we have not unilaterally decided to build almost 1,200 houses a year. We've been told that we have to, or to suffer the consequences. So we have chosen a route which allows us, as best we can, to provide wider benefits, by focusing on the garden settlements that bring new strategic infrastructure that will aid the long-term growth of our borough, but that also allow us to mitigate the impacts on local communities. Related to this point, I would remind colleagues that Tunbridge Wells Borough Council is proposing very significant growth at its boundary with Maidstone, and that Medway Council has just released details of its local plan review, which is seeking to build almost 27,000 houses. Finally, I would remind members that as part of the call for sites process, we received a very significant response, which included a variety of smaller and larger sites, many of which, for various reasons, will be contentious in local areas. If we abandon this plan, we will have to revisit the sites submitted, as this may be our only route forward. This could mean that we will need to rely heavily on a lot of smaller sites, and dependent upon site capacity and infrastructure needs, may also have to visit some sites that were discounted last time around. In any event, some of them will come forward immediately if we choose to stall this process, because that is exactly the chink in our armour that developers are waiting for. This will be exacerbated as our housing land supply deteriorates. Therefore, I move that this Council accepts in full the recommendations of the SPI Committee on the 4th of October 2021, as per the papers which are presented in front of you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor David Burton. Members, I will point out that any proposed amendments must comply with Rule 20.6a of the Council Procedure Rules, and any under Parts 2 to 4 of that rule, leaving out, adding or inserting words, cannot alter the draft plan being recommended to the Council for approval to the extent that it would have the effect of negating the motion. I thought it might be useful to advise members of that. Now, in opening the debate, I already have notice of that Councillors Bob Hinder, Councillor Bryant and Councillor Brindle wish to speak. Thereafter, it will be Councillor English, Councillor Hastie.
Madam Mayor, isn't it generally in order to take an amendment that's been tabled before we proceed any further?
One moment, please, while I take advice on that. One moment, let me take advice on that, please. I stand corrected. I do apologise, Councillor English. I'm correct in my order of speakers, but I'm not correct procedurally. So thank you for pointing that out. I have to look to you, Councillor English, to move an amendment, and I will ask for a seconder, obviously, after that.
Can I ask if the Democratic Services officers can give us a second to actually circulate that amendment to members who may not have had it on the Conservative side?
That would be helpful, thank you.
I know some of them have seen it, but some of them haven't.
Has everybody got sight of the amendment before I ask Councillor English if he would kindly read it out? Yeah, please
I think everyone has.
yeah, just please read it out for the benefit of anybody watching on the webcast.
Of course, Madam Mayor, and thank you to our excellent Democratic Services staff for their assistance. I've tabled an amendment which will be seconded by my colleague Councillor Harwood. And it reads, this Council resolves to agree the recommendations of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 4th of October, subject to 1. The deletion of LPR S4 Lidsing and LPR SA 312 Beacon Park Coxheath. 2. The removal of LPR SP5, the Leeds Langley safeguarding proposal. 3. Reduction of the numbers at LPR SA 5 brackets B Invicta Park to 6 to 700. And the addition of 20% affordable housing and a 20% biodiversity gain, with due deference paid to the historic and cultural legacy of the park, along with a defined minimum area of parkland and semi-natural open space. 4. Removing the country park in LPR SA 4 brackets A and replacing it with a set area of woodland and wetland nature reserve and a 20% biodiversity gain. 5. Reinserting the proposed garden village settlement north of Marden, including the provision of a defined area of natural and semi-natural open space, a nature reserve and an overall gain of 20% in biodiversity. 6, and perhaps least controversially, undertaking further work to expand the evidence base for increasing tree coverage and improving watercourse quality within the borough to mitigate the impact of climate change.
Thank you, Councillor English. My next step...
Am I not allowed to speak?
Not at this stage, because
okay,
I'm not sure whether or not that amendment is acceptable, mindful of the notification that I gave you earlier, whether or not it complies with Rule 20.6a of our procedure rules. I ask our legal advisor, Ms. Bolas, could you advise, please?
Not
Thank
to
you.
negate all...
One moment,
Thank you, Madam
please.
Mayor. As you said earlier, Rule 20.6 of the Council Procedure Rules at Part 3.1 of the Constitution gives the criteria for a valid amendment. Amongst those criteria are the insertion or addition of words, which I believe this amendment is. However, there is a proviso that that can be done as long as the effect is not to negate the motion. If the effect of this addition proposed is such that it would mean that the SPI recommendations to approve the local plan review draft for consultation submission in its current format, which was before SPI and recommended here, is significantly altered such that what is being put forward is a different plan, then my advice is that the amendment would negate the motion before you, such that it would not meet Rule 20.6. I'd have to defer to the Local Plan Review Director, Mr. Coyne, to advise as to whether the proposed amendment does amount to such a significant change to the draft plan, and to the Mayor to rule on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Bolas. Where's he? Oh, where's he? Mr. Coyne, thought you'd disappeared. Over to you, please, for advice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking at the amendment, I would have to say that the impact that this would have on the evidence base and the spatial strategy within the plan would be the fundamental change.
In that, I speak...
One moment, please, Councillor English. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coyne, for your advice. I have to say that having heard the advice from both my legal advisor and from Mr. Coyne, I rule that the amendment is not valid. So we now move on to the next amendment.
Can I still speak, Madam Mayor?
No. I'm now going to move on to the next amendment. Excuse
sorry,
me.
This is an outrageous process.
The process is clearly set out. The amendment has not been voted on. It is not acceptable. I would like to hear the next amendment,
Madam
please.
Mayor, perhaps if I could... Madam Mayor, if I could perhaps just give some further advice. It is part of the Constitution at Regulation 9 that the Mayor's ruling is final unless any challenge is supported by 2/3 of the members present and voting. Councillor English, obviously, you'll have an opportunity to speak in due course on the motion. It's the amendment that is not valid. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there was another amendment.
Madam Mayor, yes. Can we propose an amendment, please?
Oh, sorry, is that another amendment? It's not very...
Propose another amendment, please.
Yeah, please do. Have you got it?
Thank you.
Could you read it out? And I'm looking at Councillor Sands.
Thank you. Yes. Can we insert after full council be recommended to defer consideration of the following matters until the next scheduled full council meeting, currently due to be held on the 8th of December 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. Deferral. And that's seconded by Councillor English. The other amendment had been seconded by Councillor Harwood, of course, which I omitted to read out. I'm waiting for this amendment to be circulated for people to see. Meanwhile, I would like to ask legal advice as to the acceptability of that amendment. Thank you, Mrs. Bolas.
Madam Mayor, my advice would be that in this case it's an addition of words, again, which must not negate the motion. Members will see at items 1 and 5 of the recommendations, they are actually date-bound for consultation between the 29th of October and the 12th of December. If deferral were to take place to the 8th of December, that negates those two motions.
Thank you very much for that legal advice. And in that case, having heard that legal advice, I'm afraid, Councillor Sands, I'm going to rule that that amendment is therefore not valid. Are there any other amendments, please? Thank you, Councillor Munford. Is that an amendment before we proceed with the debate on the substantive motion? Councillor Munford.
Sorry, I'm having problems hearing you. Hope you can hear me. I'm looking at what is being proposed by Councillor Sams and seconded by Councillor T. Sams. And on my piece of paper, it is an amendment to one of the policies that I made at SPI and was carried at SPI. I'm slightly confused at what...
Oh, in that case, so am I, because I thought we were discussing the amendment about deferring consideration. One moment, please, members. Yes, can I just clarify that, Councillor Munford? What is actually been unacceptable is to defer consideration of the following matters until the next scheduled full council meeting. It's the deferring those dates. That is the only thing. The rest of it, I understand there is a part in there that refers to the word rural. That still stands. To your relief, I should think. Thank you for your patience on that, members. It's important that we're very clear on these constitutional matters and on the advice so given. So we now move to debate on the substantive item. As I said, I have already had notice for Councillors Hinder, Councillor Bryant and Councillor Brindle to speak, then Councillor English and Councillor Hastie. I will, one moment please. I'm really going to be kind here. Councillor Harwood, your question?
Indicating I wish to speak, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. You got me worried there for a minute. And I take it... Sorry. And Councillor Grigg, you wish to speak as well. Thank you, I had misinterpreted. All right, hold on, can we just stop? Let's start with some of the speakers, otherwise I will need the rest of the evening to read out the number of speakers. So can we just crack on with Councillor Hinder, please, and then I will pick up the other names. Councillor Hinder.
Thank you very much, Mayor. May I start by saying a huge thank you to the 200 plus residents who feel so passionate about the damage this proposal will do to the area around Bredhurst that they've taken the time to tell me their views. I name Richard, Antoinette, Lindsay, Christine, Victoria and Vanessa amongst these. One resident posed a question to me. Could you please supply me with a list of positives for this proposal? And I had to sit and scratch my head trying to think of an answer. The only one that sprung to mind was that it would satisfy the government's requirement for Maidstone to have more houses. But what real assurance would that give to worried residents that this council is acting in their best interest? This, I feel, is the crux of the matter. We're not acting in the interests or meeting the desires of our residents. We're pandering to the demands of a nebulous body hiding in the groves of Whitehall. Medway Council have been very clear in stating that they do not support this development, wanting to maintain and keep the green lung between the authorities and not allowing coalescence covering the whole area in concrete. This is a view with which I and my fellow ward members strongly agree, as do the majority of our constituents. I have received not one piece of lobbying in favour of this proposal. Nor does it appear to concern residents that the council is being consistent. Having rejected a proposal for new houses at Binbury Park on the grounds that this is within the AONB, are we now to agree to blight forever an area of AONB at Bredhurst by covering it with a new slip road to M2 Junction 4? A road that is likely to be little used, as it will take drivers by routes that residents of the new development will not want to use. London-bound traffic may well opt to use back roads to Junction 3, while to get to Maidstone, who in their right mind would drive east from the new development to Junction 4, then west on the motorway to Junction 3, then south down Bluebell Hill, which is likely to be soon carrying substantially more traffic from the proposed new Lower Thames crossing, when a direct route lies on their doorstep, due south through Bredhurst and Boxley villages. This already overcrowded, narrow and steep rat run has long been a subject of meetings to try and ease the existing problems. I met with a KCC officer very recently to discuss this issue, and she openly admitted to me there is nothing further that can be done. The developer has indicated, however, that he will provide £100,000 to improve the roads through Bredhurst and Boxley. Little more than enough for a few coats of paint or bollards at today's prices. I maintain this is an offer of appeasement rather than real substance that will make little, if any, difference. May I also draw fellow members' attention to a very detailed and deep insight into the current situation regarding healthcare in this area. This was supplied to me by a very concerned but qualified resident who works for the CCG.
Please be briefer, Councillor Hinder, please.
No, I'm nearly finished, thank you, Mayor. Facts that should have been brought to our attention as members, but sadly were not done so. There are many flaws in this plan that have not been properly debated, and we're now told that time has run out. No, time, effort and more work must be put in before the situation becomes irreversible. I personally can see an inspector having a field day at the public consultation if we do not do this. I will therefore not be offering support for the proposed LPR in its current format.
Thank you, Councillor Hinder. Now, Councillor Heidi Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a newly elected councillor for Boxley Ward, I feel honoured to be in this position and to be able to speak today. As a resident of this area my whole life, whose family and friends and now colleagues live here, and as a businesswoman with many years' experience working in blue-chip international organisations with extensive skills in negotiation, developing projects and looking into the very minutiae of detail to get the right results, I cannot support this plan in its current form, and I will stand here as the voice of the many residents who have called me, messaged me, emailed me and spoken to me face to face, who have raised their very real and appropriate concerns. I am appalled that Mr Atwood's tactics that he has utilised to coerce, threaten and intimidate residents to sign paperwork, telling them their land would be worth nothing if they didn't sign. I am appalled to think that we as council cannot or are unwilling to take a pause, to reflect and make changes, even in light of Michael Gove's and Oliver Dowden's comments on Sunday the 3rd of October 2021, and today Boris Johnson's words around not building on greenfield land. I am appalled to see residents' views being ignored at the committee meeting this week, and to hear that some southern councillors see the northern and eastern areas as a dumping ground for new houses. Let me tell you all, they are not. I cannot sit back and watch as an area of outstanding natural beauty on our doorstep is ripped away from us, from the families who have lived here for generations and from the generations to come. I was about 9 years old when councils paved over Princes Park and Walderslade Woods, where I used to walk with my dog, and I didn't have the ability to do anything about it then. Now I'm here and I do have a voice that is backed by hundreds of very upset, distraught and angry residents. There are many unanswered questions. These are just 4 out of at least 15 or so, and I will happily present the other questions via email after this meeting if required. What is the actual ecological impact of this mindless destruction? We need the facts. They are sparse or non-existent as far as I can see. Where is the modelling for the impact of all the additional cars that will arrive in this area, the country lanes, the motorway junctions? Where is the detailed response from Highways England? How are residents of Lidsing, Walderslade, Lordswood, Wigmore, Hempstead, Boxley, Bredhurst supposed to get hospital treatment, doctor's appointments either now or in a potentially bleaker future where thousands more people will put pressure on our crippled Medway Maritime Hospital and doctors' surgeries? People's lives are already and will be further put at risk. I will not have blood on my hands by voting for this plan.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bryant. May I respectfully ask councillors to try to keep within your 3 minutes? I'm being very generous so far, but don't let's be here till midnight. I know feelings are running high, but please try to be briefer. I now call upon Councillor Anne Brindle, and after Councillor Brindle, I will be calling on Councillor English.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will keep within the 3 minutes. In fact, I'll probably be only 30 seconds because I cannot add anything to the excellent points already made by my fellow councillors in Boxley Ward. But I will only add that I cannot support this plan while Lidsing and the surrounding sites in Medway remain. Thank you.
Beautifully brief. Thank you very much indeed. Your points well made. I now call upon Councillor English.
Madam Mayor, over the years I've tried always to be constructive and to put forward proposals that don't wreck things. I am shocked at the way this local plan has been handled. In previous local plans, largely written, I must admit, by myself and Councillor Harwood through the democratic process, there was at least a democratic process. Yes, it was bloody and messy at times, but members debated and discussed allocations, potential sites in committee. We discussed policies. We have had one discussion at an open committee meeting, and that was on Monday night. That was the first committee meeting to actually discuss sites, and it was the last. We are told now it's too late to do anything about it. Strange that the last time we had a local plan, the equivalent council meeting, where we finalised the local plan, a number of sites were removed at that meeting, including Church Landway in Bearsted. Funny it's now impossible to do what we could do then. Strange. I have to say, I came here to move an amendment in a constructive spirit to try and move this local plan forward without some of the more egregious mistakes in it, such as the Leeds-Langley safeguarding proposal, which will guarantee that we build at least 4,000 more houses than we need, and actually to pay for this road it's going to be a lot more than 4,000, certainly if, unless of course you are saying there's not going to be any social housing in it. That's going to be interesting because you've already taken it out of Invicta. So how many more sites can we remove from social housing, Mr. Leader, and still meet your 1,000 affordable housing target? Don't think you're going to be doing that somehow on this local plan if it goes through. I can guarantee you now, with this lack of democratic accountability, with the lack of all the elements in place from the highways agencies and every other body, but if this goes forward in haste, it will end up the same way as your original proposal to proceed directly to Article 19, which fortunately some of us, including some of your own side, turned down because we have seen what happened with more haste, less speed at Swale, who were knocked back. I came here to be constructive, to move this proposal forward and to remove some of the worst mistakes, and so that we don't have at least a terrible local plan. I will be voting against this proposal now because the only way to sort out the ongoing car crash we are about to have is to vote down this proposal, modify it, and yes, do some of the work that has been assiduously avoided because it shows that on any rational assessment, the Lenham and Lidsing proposals are inferior to another more politically inconvenient one.
Thank you, Councillor English. Okay, let us move on to Councillor Hastie, please. No, I beg your pardon, Councillor Harwood. I know that you were hot off the mark next to Councillor English.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we all realise that we, this evening, are going to bear the gravest of responsibilities and that our votes will change our part of Kent and will change people's lives forever. It's as simple as that. There's lots of reference to past local plans, and the world was very different. We had to take less housing, there was less government interference in the local planning process. But I still genuinely believe that the line-by-line forensic engagement by local councillors sitting, burning the midnight oil night after night, produced better plans. I also believe that there wasn't the bartering that was talked about earlier. There was genuine cross-party debate about how we can minimise the impact of development. All development has an impact on communities, has an impact on the countryside, on townscapes, but we can achieve better. I really do genuinely have a fear that we could, with the current document in front of us, end up with the plan being found to be unsound by an inspector. And I'll just mention a number of reasons why. I do genuinely think that the Lidsing site, because of its impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty, is very problematic. Clearly, in landscape terms, you've got the woodland belt along Hempstead, Lordswood and so on. This development would breach that and stick out like a sore thumb within the AONB and thus undermine the functioning of the AONB. And in the area of outstanding natural beauty is a national designation, and inspectors hold great store by it. And the dip slope of the Downs is a very open, some say bleak, landscape where the development, not just by day when you see all the red brick, but also by night when it's lit up like a Christmas tree, will fundamentally change it. Areas such as Redhurst Woods and Boxley Warren and those beautiful countryside areas that still support great biodiversity are already under profound challenge from the footfall of the growing populations around them.
Councillor Howard, I'm sorry, but the quality of sound is very poor. Plus, I think you're fast approaching 3 minutes. I don't know if anything can be done,
I'll move on to that, because I think the most important issue here that we must tackle is the very poorly written policy around the Leeds-Langley safeguarding. If the Leeds-Langley safeguarding policy goes forward in its current format, it will invite an application for enabling development of between 4,000 and 10,000 houses in some of our most sensitive historic landscape, and it will undermine all of the safeguarding policies for our countryside in this borough. And then finally, the proposal for the Invicta Barracks on historic late medieval parkland is disgraceful. To have no affordable housing in a sustainable location such as this, and to think that you could put that many houses into that site where the only developable area is the south and east of the barracks site, and it won't support, probably 600-700 maximum.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harwood. I think you made your point this evening and indeed the other evening. Thank you. I do apologise for the sound quality. I keep looking around, in the hope. Good. You might have to. I'm not sure if Councillor Harwood be speaking again. Can I suggest you hang on to that? Because I'm getting a bit concerned about the quality here. Next, I have Councillor Grigg.
Thank you. I find myself in a very difficult position this evening, as in my past role as Vice Chair of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure, I was involved with the formulation of this plan, working alongside Councillor David Burton. We worked very well together. We made decisions, and we always reported back to our respective parties for approval of our strategic action points. So let us make no mistake tonight, this is a cross-party plan. From the very beginning, I've been vocal about the need to get this plan adopted and to avoid at all costs not having a 5-year land supply. It was obvious that we were never going to please everyone. Central government set us an impossible task. However, in order for things to run as smoothly as they possibly could, Councillor Burton and I made sure that ward councillors were contacted about potential sites in
in their areas and surrounding areas, and we listened to their views and comments. I'm still listening now, Monday, tonight, my emails, I'm still listening. Therefore, when I found out that at the very last minute, a replacement site that threatened the anti-coalescent belt between Lewes and Coxheath was put in, I was very angry. A miscommunication meant that Beacons Park in Coxheath was inserted into the plan without any discussion with the Coxheath ward councillors or myself. No consultation, and that is not acceptable. This breach of process singles this allocation out from everything else. It has been treated differently, and as such, it should be deleted. I know that it can be and will be fought at Regulation 19, but again, everyone here knows if it gets put in the local plan, it is going to be virtually impossible to get it out. A small site in the scheme of things, 85 houses, but I believe if it's allowed, then it will question the integrity of the entire plan. And I want to make it very clear tonight, I would not accept that regardless of what site it was. I would not accept no member consultation on any site.
Thank you,
So tonight, members, I speak to you as a strategic councillor, and I also speak to you as the member for Lewes. You've heard the alterations that my fellow Lib Dems wanted to see, but unfortunately I also cannot support a plan that threatens the ward that I was elected to protect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grigg. I next have Councillor Hastie, and after Councillor Hastie, I have Councillor Cook.
Thank you. To me, this plan is a death warrant for our precious open spaces, ecology and the local environment. The proposal to put 1,300 houses on the Invicta Barracks site is insane. North Ward is already one of the most deprived and polluted wards in this borough, and we do not have sufficient infrastructure to cope as it is, let alone with a ludicrous plan to add 1,300 more homes. Looking at the plans for the northern part of the borough, and the suggestion to concrete over the tiny village of Lidsing and surrounding areas is absurd. The devastation that will be caused to this beautiful part of Kent on the edge of the AONB will be lost forever. Just last week, the Conservative administration implied that not agreeing to their future election plans was nothing short of arrogant. Yet here we are, being asked to ignore thousands of residents across this borough by pushing through a local plan that will cause irretrievable harm to this town. As the council would not accept the amendment put forward, I can only come to one conclusion. It is not fit for the residents of this borough that I have been elected to serve, and for them, I cannot support the plan tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hastie. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to speak just about a couple of aspects. I do find it somewhat interesting that members are talking about the need to withdraw the safeguarding area for the Leeds-Langley Relief Road against a threat of mass development coming forward in that area. Yet they're prepared to risk the whole plan and the consequences of not having a 5-year supply in terms of the impact that will have on the whole district. I heard a question earlier in terms of, who actually wants a Leeds-Langley Relief Road? Well, where have you been for the last 35 years? The requirement for the Relief Road goes back through a discussion in terms of the South East Maidstone urban expansion. We've got the urban expansion, thanks to the last plan, largely. The plan is that the urban expansion is there, but there's no Relief Road. Consequently, all the traffic in the southeast of Maidstone travels down either the B2163 through Leeds or down through Willington Street. Traffic is becoming quite crazy in those areas, and it's going to represent a danger. This plan does not commit us to a relief road. It does not commit us to any number of houses, and I would urge members on page 105 of the report, which is to read para 692. Because what happens with the safeguarding area is that it facilitates ongoing discussions between KCC, MBC, landowners and other stakeholders with the potential for a future development plan document to be produced. So we're talking about retaining an option, and an option against which KCC, as the Highways Authority, has already tested 3 alternative routes for a Leeds-Langley Relief Road. All 3 met the minimum cost-benefit ratio required by the Department of Transport. So there is a need, and an ongoing need, for a Leeds-Langley Relief Road. It should have been delivered 20 years ago. What we are listening to at the moment is a desire to take this out and kick this into the long grass once again forever. This is a step in the right direction, but just a small step. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I have Councillor Kimmants, and after Councillor Kimmants, I have Councillor Webb. Councillor Kimmants.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm brief. I'm always brief, and I'm always to the point. I talk straight. Last week I sat here and what did I hear? Do. And then I read my pack, Invicta Barracks, no affordable housing. And one thing that Councillor Burton said was he was going to have affordable housing, rented housing. 1,300 houses at 40%, that's 520 houses that are not going to be on there. I really can't understand that. I concur with all of my colleagues with what they've said, and I can't support this plan. So, like I said, I would be brief, and I have been.
Thank you, Councillor Kimmants. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Grigg for, I'm sort of going to echo stuff that she has said. On Monday at the SPI meeting, I mentioned that Coxheath had at Regulation 18, had 3 sites to the west of Coxheath. And then we find that it's to be replaced at Regulation 19 by this one site to the east, which is not the best option due to the fact that it will put all the traffic coming from this site towards the Linton Crossroads. We know there are monies available for junction improvements, but Linton Crossroads has needed improving for very many years, and nothing has ever done about it. And unfortunately, by putting this site here instead of the 3 to the west, cars will inevitably not go through the Coxheath village. They will all turn to the A229. If we'd had the sites to the west, there was more options of travelling elsewhere. Unfortunately, this morning, I heard through social media that actually a school child going to Cornwallis School was hit by a van walking along this road. So what would we do? Put another junction in and increase the traffic that would perhaps cause another hundreds of children walk towards this school, and we don't want to discourage them from walking. We want them to go and walk. So by putting another junction at this point will not be a very good idea when we could have had other sites in there. So it would be very hard to support this in this form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. I have Councillor Harper next, and then I have Councillor Burton, Councillor Sands, Councillor Horner and Councillor Mackay, and can I request that you are as succinct as you can be, particularly Councillor Harper.
Ever since 2010, when the Conservative government swept away 50 years of planning controls, we faced a developer's charter. The problem faced by councils in the South East, like Maidstone, is the National Conservative government requiring over time to brick over the whole of the South East. Labour continues to support building the number of houses Maidstone families need. Only today I was talking to two people I know working in retail, both desperate to get a house, and looking at what they'd heard on the local plan, feeling they were probably going to have to move out of Maidstone because of house prices. This plan fails them. It fails the people of Maidstone. Last week, we all sat in this room and agreed with the leader that we should have an ambition to build low-cost quality homes. I supported 1,000 initially, but then to hopefully build more after that. This plan supports houses of multiple occupancy. The Barracks site, we've heard, has no requirement for social housing. And we can see the same applying to other town centre sites. To be a viable community, people and families need to be able to afford a home. In the 12 years I've lived in Maidstone, I've seen the countryside recede from my house as the urban boundary has continuously gone past Hermitage Lane and is halfway over to Alresford and Larkfield. I know a lot of people in West Maidstone who have left our town for areas where they would not face increasing urbanisation. Are we now condemning more to that? Like a lot of you, I've had hundreds of emails over Lidsing. The residents are passionate in their detestation of this council. Labour has, throughout the local plan review, supported the creation of Kings Hill-type self-sufficient settlements in the countryside. That is why we still support Heathlands. The other garden settlements proposed initially included Marden, Binbury and Lidsing. Of them all, Marden and Binbury seem to have the most viable proposals to self-sufficient country communities. Lidsing is just an add-on to the Medway conurbation, and it reminds people in West Maidstone of all the battles around Fant Farm, which was a similar type issue. So I choose Lidsing over Marden. I can only venture to say it's possibly because the Marden councillors have more influence on the majority party than the Boxey councillors. And from the benches opposite, that looks a high likelihood, but I might be wrong. My doubts over Lidsing have grown over the last 2.5 weeks since the Lidsing campaign has got going. However, Medway, as we've heard tonight, has to find 27,000 extra homes. So the Lidsing campaign might find they've got a lot more work to do to save their area. Councillor Mackay is going to express some of our other reservations on this plan. But earlier, I've almost finished. Earlier, Mr. Chris Hawkins demonstrated more of the problems we face with the current plan. This evening I was going to abstain on this, but given that we are not allowed to make any amendments or follow any democratic process, I am now, with the Labour group, going to vote against this local plan. We need a local plan for local people. We need to stand up to a Conservative government and tell them no more housing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Burton, next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If only I could have responded to all of those comments as we went along and tried to present a balanced consideration. I'd like to respond to Councillor Harper, and where will the people live if you don't build the houses? Where? These houses, the housing need exists. So let's not duck and dive around that tonight. The housing need exists.
Was that it, Councillor Burton, or did you want to?
No, I need about 3 hours. But look, tonight, if the position of the people opposite were, we don't think this plan is good enough, we need to take it back several stages for reconsideration, and we acknowledge that the consequence of that will be, I would estimate, a 12 to 18 month delay, and we will as a consequence be without a local plan, and it will become a developer's charter, but we think that that risk is sufficiently worth taking, that consequence worth taking. I would respect that view. But to go about it in the way that has been presented tonight to put the high notes of public opinion on there, I don't respect. If you don't think it's good enough, say that. Take it back several stages, but the consequence is an absent, silent local plan and the presumption in favour. So here comes Fant Farm again. Here comes the development at Oakwood Park. Here comes development in that Leeds-Langley area that actually we've got a policy in front of us that safeguards, because if we had a 5-year land supply, that presumption to build within that corridor until we as a council have made a decision of whether a Leeds-Langley Relief Road is worthy of the development. That's a balancing decision that we are yet to consider, but you reject the safeguarding. If we do not have a local plan in place, no plan, developers free-for-all. Now, Councillor Mrs Grigg, thank you for acknowledging that this plan has never been devised on political basis. We sat for many hours, many days, weeks on end it felt like, actually trying to find where there was compromise and consensus. And that, Councillor English, was when your party had control. You had the leadership.
Oh, stop it. Come on. Have you finished, Councillor Burton? I'm getting fed up now.
So, Councillor Mrs Grigg, thank you for acknowledging that. I actually think that it's a travesty what happened on the Coxheath site. You were present, but it was described in such a way that it did not register, and that's how that happened. I wish some of the other people that have now got all the views had actually attended a single meeting of the SPY committee with contribution, or even a single member workshop. But anyway, it's a straight choice. Take it back several stages for complete reconsideration. No plan, no control. Move forward to Regulation 19, let the inspector make a judgment and see what modifications he recommends. That's the choice.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. I have Councillor Sands. I can't remember, was it Janetta or Tom? Janetta. Councillor Janetta Sands, please.
Thank you. I've been asked by John Britt, the Chairman of the Lenham Parish Council, to speak on behalf of Lenham Parish Council who can't be here tonight. So I'm just going to read out what he's asked me to read out, if that's okay with you, Madam Mayor.
I'm not convinced that it's acceptable. This is a debate between members. I'm sorry, I am not going to allow that. This is for a debate between council members, I regret to say. So in that case, if you don't wish to speak, Councillor Sands, I will move on to Councillor Denise Joy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but after listening to what the Boxley ward councillor said, it got to my heart. Now, I know that planning and strategic planning and everything else, you've got to do what your head's telling you, and it's got to be, and that's why I'm not on planning. However, I may not be on planning, but I have a very capable councillor over there in Councillor Grigg, that yes, we didn't sit at your meetings, but Councillor Grigg worked tirelessly in coming back and letting us know what was happening. So for you to say that, that is disrespectful to Councillor Grigg, because I know how hard she worked as well. Anyway, I wasn't going to speak, so I just wanted to say that. But now I'm on a roll, I am going to come back and say something else, because I also sat here on Wednesday, and one of the things I went home, and it does play on my mind for everybody to know when I get home, I dwell on things, and one of the things I dwelt on was that I was being told that I didn't listen to residents, but I know it was for everybody when that was being thrown at us, this side. Well, what I'm going to end on is to say, I've been a councillor now for 27 years. I have never seen the amount of people, emails I've got, the amount of people that have turned up tonight, which is telling my heart and my head that I can't vote for this. And one of the things you said was, did I think it wasn't good enough? No, I don't. I think we can do better. And if we do it together and don't keep putting in these odd changes at the last minute and we stay together, we can make sure that those people sitting there feel that they're being listened to. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Joy. Now, before I have Councillor Mackay, I'll take Councillor Sams, Tom Sams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I say, first of all, I'd like to thank Charlie for his inspiration tonight. Members, residents are rightly angry with this document, a 980-page report. Tonight we are here to approve a plan to go for further consultation. The facts are the documents are not fully accessible to be read, and therefore the consultation itself flawed, as some SPI papers remain restricted and we believe should be available to all to see. Garden communities have been scrutinised without regard for the fullest of information. We have freedom of information requests piling on the desk of council, so many asked by Sol, transparency hidden behind commercial sensitivity over public interest, and this is what riles so many. Little factual basis, just so many questions answered with so much ambiguity. Unsurprisingly, Sol and Lennon Parish Council and residents are incensed at how this council has acted, how it has engaged with them, and openly been economical with the truth. The process has been provided secret meetings with unlimited discussions, information that has been hidden from view. At the same time, over a period of nearly 3 years, the proposal we have tonight has come forward like ducks carefully and dutifully lined up in a preordained row. Council have had time to give Heathland's proposal scrutiny, but meeting after meeting failed to question the scheme's viability. You are content instead to sit back and allow the council's money to be spent so unwisely. Sadly, we have witnessed political collective manoeuvrings to ensure Heathlands and Lidsing has been selected. The council's hidden figures behind smoke and mirrors continues to hide its own inadequacies. On Heathlands, the document says, being sensitive to the place, the proposal fits in comfortably with the existing buildings and landscapes. You know, you just couldn't make it up. Oh, but you have. The reality, unable to bring forward sound and rational infrastructural deliverability. Members, we will be open to potential judicial review, and this won't stop other significant hostile, aggressive proposals being brought through. Farcical claims of employability always sees more car journeys in and out unsustainably. And ashamedly and sadly for all, the drive to build on green space, losing valuable agricultural land, easy to develop and leave our climate change agenda in tatters, and no matter of artificially created space will change that fact. We have listened to the debate and we should welcome constructive persuasion. We are told if we do not approve this tonight, it will leave us open to developers' open season. Is that good enough reason to put forward a flawed document which will fall away anyway? The garden communities will fail, and so will this plan. It feels like an implosion. I heard someone say an ongoing car crash. Well, the Lennon Parish Council and Sol have been predicting that for 2 years. And, Madam Mayor, you know, I'm ashamed, really, that we got to this stage. I'm ashamed that this council pits community against community against community as to which community loses out the best. I'm ashamed to be a councillor tonight. So, for Christ's sake, let's make the right decision.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sands. I have, after Councillor Mackay, I have Councillor Clark, then Councillor Garton, and then Councillor Rose. So I really do need you to be more succinct, please. Councillor Mackay next, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be succinct. I said enough on Monday evening, I think, at the Spy. But I will say this. I think the vast majority of councillors here understand the importance of having a local plan. And I think it is quite possible that we can get together over the next 2 or 3 months and come together to meet the numbers we are obliged to meet, unfortunately. In reality, we're really not that far away. There are some big decisions to be made, but we're not that far away. So this scaremongering about it puts us back 18 months, 2 years, is just that. It's scaremongering. One of the things I took real exception to Monday was the Leeds Langley proposals, because I felt that as they stand at the moment, it puts that area into play as far as developers are concerned. And I said, rather jokingly, maybe I shouldn't, I'm deadly serious, we need a relief road, as Councillor Cook quite eloquently said, to take the pressure off Willington Street and the Sutton Road. The chimneys have been built already to pay for it in spades. We don't need any further housing along that protected area of our border.
I think that was it, wasn't it, Councillor Mackay?
I will leave it there, Madam Mayor.
Oh, jolly good, thank you. On to Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think one of the things that we really need to reiterate tonight is the fact that most residents think that our housing numbers have been turbocharged over the last 5 years or so. And that number is 883 units per year. With this local plan, we're turbocharging them once again by 40% across the borough to 1,214. And we hear a lot of members across from us, in fact, saying, if this doesn't go through as it is, we've got to get it through, we can't change it. It will be planning by appeal, it will be a developer's charter, there will be sanctions. To quote somebody from earlier, we were told that we would suffer the consequences. Yes, Madam Mayor, the Conservatives at Whitehall cast a long shadow over this borough. It's the Conservatives at Whitehall that have brought these numbers to our doorstep. And yes, we may have had leader of the council up until quite recently, but we have never during that time chaired strategic planning or had a majority on strategic planning. And these numbers, which we were, as Lib Dems, were forced to abide by, they weren't our numbers. They were numbers being forced down by the Conservatives at Whitehall. So when we go to these briefings and we hear people across the way from us saying, we've got to do something about these numbers, perhaps we should get our MPs to write a letter and say something about the numbers. Well, guess what? You're all in it together because it's the Conservatives at Whitehall that have brought this upon us. Now, in terms of detail on this plan, I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did in strategic planning a few days ago. But yes, this Leeds Langley Relief Road safeguarding area, this is not a road. Officers have told us that there's potential for 4,000 houses here. It's not only housing over a road, ahead of a road, because we all know, let's face it, the way planning is at the moment, we don't put a road down and then the houses come, it goes the other way round. But the thing that really concerns me is when I look at this, that section of land is on the west. Now, no one has ever agreed that that's the route for the Leeds Langley bypass. When you talk to people, when they come to the Joint Transport Board meetings, and you say there's a possibility for it to be one side and it's a very sensitive area, or the other side where it's the Leeds Castle Estate, some people will say to you, oh, of course, you wouldn't have it on the west of the main road. And other people will say, oh, of course, you wouldn't have it on the right of the main road. So this is something that is yet to be determined, and yet the safeguarding area is very, very much on the west. The one thing that really struck me, and I mentioned this to members in strategic planning, is the fact that a very large section of that safeguarded area is landscape of local value. And in our last local plan, we worked very, very hard to safeguard our most valued landscapes. However, there is no mention of this in the plans and the maps in this Regulation 19 document. Why is that? Why can't residents that were coming to the consultation as we go into 18B, why did they not see which areas we saw as protected? I just do not understand that. I'll end by saying that members on this side proposed and were successful in achieving an 18B consultation. If we hadn't had that, we wouldn't even have this small amount of consultation, this small amount of feedback that we're getting tonight. Because in the spring, if members opposite had had their way, this would have went straight to the government inspector, and you would not have been able to have done this. It would have went straight to the inspector, and all of your feedback would not have come to us as members of this borough. They would have went straight to the government inspector, and there are members here that could have just washed their hands of it and said, oh, the government inspector is the person that's responsible for this, not us.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you.
Have you concluded? Thank you. Members, I've got another at least six people to go to speak. But before we do, we've been going for 2 hours. Members, would you like a break of 10 minutes or would you like to continue? The choice is yours. Would you like to just crack on? Excellent, that's what I like to hear. Well, I'm not sure actually, because Councillor Garton's next, so I'm not sure if that was a good decision. I've got Councillor Garton and then Councillor Daniel Rose.
I'm pleased for your confidence, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hawkins, our public speaker tonight, he really spoke from my heart. He made very valid points. And he's absolutely right, nobody particularly likes this plan. And indeed, it was made with some haste. It was not our choice. It was the legal constraints by which we are finding us here. And let's face it, we may be elected councillors, but in effect, to a lot of people, I always say, we are elected local administrators. The rules are not being made in Maidstone. The question tonight is whether we can avert some harm to the borough by accepting some organised development planning, or whether to open the floodgates to unlimited development without any restraint. Without a local plan, it will be a free-for-all. Now, I'm a conservative, I'm a free marketeer, but honestly, opening the floodgates to unlimited and uncontrolled development, even to me, that is a step too far. The consequence of not moving this plan forward is the rejection of any safeguards. We will end up with no local plan, and Councillor Mackay, this is not scaremongering.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. I now have Councillor Rose, after which we'll have Councillor Nagy. So, Councillor Daniel Rose.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make one quick point that I don't believe has been made tonight, and it did surprise me listening through the debate that no one's actually mentioned this, but quite apart from the fact that we have housing targets, the other reason why we have to build housing is because there are young people, and indeed many different walks of life of people, that are very much struggling to own their own home, or have a home in general. I am one of the younger councillors in this room, and I would say that even people of my generation, and for definite younger generations, find it very difficult now to buy their own home. One of the best outlets for buying your first home is new build developments. And I would say, anecdotally, a large number of my peers have had a first home, which was on a new build development. Ultimately, these people have to live somewhere. If it's not in the places that have been suggested in this plan, then where? Places like my ward are already housing from one border of the borough to the other. There is no more room in a lot of the urban wards. I could kick a ball from one side or the other of the green space that's in my ward. There is not a lot of more space to build more housing. So, I just think it's worth pointing out that whilst green space and areas of natural beauty are very, very important, having a home is also very important, and particularly for your children and grandchildren and people younger than me who want to get on the housing ladder and want to have their own home. It's got to go somewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. I have Councillor Nagy next, and after Councillor Nagy, I have Councillors Blackmore and Cooper. Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. And also, we need fields to grow food as well. That has to come in there somewhere. We can't concrete over everything, because we'll never have anything to eat, will we? Anyway, that's logical. Anyway, the local plan tonight is not really fit for purpose. I only received my pack Thursday night, and I work really hard, as most people know, and rushing through, and know there's an SPI meeting which I attended. And it seems to me tonight, in all my years, I've always understood that committees put recommendations to the full council meeting for approval. And tonight we seem to have been blocked. So it seems to me, looking at what's happened tonight, that really you have to object in advance to the subcommittees, because there seems to be somewhere down the line that the democratic process is not being adhered to, in my view. I just can't believe that an amendment can't be voted on this plan just in case it rocks it a bit. Or there's something, I just can't understand that. That's not democratic. That's what we're here for, is to vote on these things. And amendments always go in at the SPI committee, we can't put an amendments to it because it might rock it a bit or change it. It's completely unbelievable. These plans were for new garden communities to be built, but I can understand it, but not at the cost of destroying existing local communities, which seems to be the case, and I just can't believe that. And what I'd like to say tonight is, last week I sat here listening to Conservative councillors telling us we should listen to the public because they are the ones that vote for us. And I would like to say then tonight, please do listen to the public and do not listen to the Conservative government that forced these targets on us. You're really moaning about your own party. All you seem to have these days is local Conservative councillors moaning about the Conservative government, the MPs writing to their own Conservative government to say how outrageous the Conservative government is. This is unbelievable. This is how our politics have come to, that you're all Conservatives, aren't you, together? Or is there just the one person at the top pulling the strings and everyone has to follow? Because I can't understand this. The local plan should be put forward by local councillors first, for local people to have some sort of involvement, because it's called local. But at the moment, it seems to be a governing plan, and we've got targets which are just impossible to meet, and all the communities are just fighting each other, hoping they're not going to have something their way.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy. Thank you very much. After Councillor Blackmore, who is next, I have Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Munford. So over to you, please, Councillor Annabel Blackmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I have slightly different papers to everyone else in this room. My understanding is we are here tonight to agree to the consultation of a proposed plan. We are not here to agree a plan. We are here to agree that this document goes forward for public consultation. And at that point, everybody is able to comment. Madam, if
Steady
I
on,
speak, please.
steady on, steady on.
Thank you, Madam.
You have the floor, Councillor Blackmore.
So everybody is able to put forward their comments. May I suggest that anyone who is in this room, whether you are unelected, whether you are here to protest, whether you are an elected member, whoever you are free to comment if you live in the borough. And I suggest you do that, because it's called public consultation. So therefore, sir, it's a public document. It will be on the council's website. If you access the website from the 29th of October, all the details will be on there about how you can comment on what is in the plan. As other members have spoken, I don't agree with everything in this plan. There's a lot of it that, frankly, I would happily take a red pen to. but I can't.
One moment, please. We've had enough interruption from the public. I would ask you, please, to sit quietly. I know emotions are running high, but please, no more interruptions. No, I'm sorry. This is a members' debate. Councillor Blackmore, you're almost out of time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I will be supporting the motion on the recommendations on the papers, because this is putting this forward to go to consultation. As to everything in the plan, as I've already said, I don't support it, and I will be making comments about what I do not agree with. And I suggest that everybody else does the same. Thank you very much for indulging me, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. And then, of course, there is the examination in public, where everybody makes their case, developers included. I'm sorry, but I will have to clear the public gallery if you can't sit quietly. I appreciate this is really hard. I'm sorry, I cannot let you speak. The next person, the next member of the council to speak is Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Munford.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I specifically tried not to interject tonight, despite you saying that you would allow me to come in, because I think I said pretty much everything at the beginning. However, there were a few points I wish to come back on, and I actually indicated to speak when Councillor Tom Sams spoke, because I rather than come back on those points, I wish to clear up a little bit of a misunderstanding. You mentioned that there is no access to yellow pages. Well, Councillor Sams, I rather hope that you have the agenda pack for tonight's meeting, and from page 866 onwards are the yellow pages that you refer to, which I certainly hope that you would have read before tonight's meeting. You also mentioned about the consultation essentially between the developer and local members. We're not here this evening to talk about that consultation with the developer, because the developer that has nothing to do with the local planning authority. That is indeed the council corporate. What we are debating tonight is our spatial strategy, which does indeed include that. So I do think it was slightly unfair to conflate those issues. There were a few other points which I picked up from other members. One was traffic in Lidsing, which I fully accept is an issue that needs to be overcome. The developer will certainly need to provide whatever is needed for mitigation of the traffic as part of their planning application. That is very clearly stated in these papers. The Leeds-Langley Relief Road has come up a number of times, and again I think there was a slight bit of misunderstanding, but Councillor Cook made it perfectly clear. These numbers, first and foremost, are not in addition to what is in this plan. Then they won't be in addition to what is in the next plan. They will form part of the next plan period if indeed we move ahead. There is no cast iron guarantee that we will move ahead to building development or a road here. It is merely that we have an aspiration to have a look at that exercise, and there is no guarantee exactly on where the road goes either, and we are fully aware that there are multiple options. I want to pick up young people certainly need housing from Councillor Rose, and that is why the government have set these targets. I appreciate that they're difficult for us tonight. The democratic process being frustrated, I don't accept that at all. There has been engagement for nearly 3 years for members of the council, and certainly some of your colleagues on your side of the chamber engaged in that process, as Councillor Grigg mentioned. And I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I certainly wouldn't accept that. The last thing, I'm just coming to a close, I know I'm out of time. People have mentioned about the housing targets, and indeed, perhaps if you had looked at your papers, recommendation number 7 is very clear that a letter will be written to local members of Parliament to request that they make every effort to engage in relation to the Council's house building targets. And that was proposed by a Conservative colleague. We have the same frustrations as everyone in this chamber. Madam Mayor, I think I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Went over a bit there, Councillor Cooper. I have 3 final people to speak, councillors to speak. They are, in this order, Councillor Munford, Councillor Newton, and finally Councillor McKenna. Over to you, Councillor Munford.
Madam Mayor, I apologise, I might have to stand up to reach the microphone. I'll introduce myself as Councillor Rose did. I'm one of the younger members of this council, and I think that's the last time you're going to laugh. I've had a fantastic night tonight. I've listened to different views, different points of views, and I've really enjoyed it. This has been going on so long. The officers in charge of it have got me on redial. I'm actually phoning them all the time, asking questions. You ask them. I've spoken to them over the weekend about this local plan review. I'm on the SPI. I'm also on the planning. I'm there. No one has lobbied me and asked me to get their points across. No one. I go to all of the briefings. You're not all there. I don't hear all these points going forward. We could have a fantastic plan if the members had engaged. And I'm sorry, that's all of the members, both sides of the House. And members, remember, we led this when we went into the beginning. Whether you agree or not, we had Lib Dems. Then we went over to the Conservatives. I'm independent. What do I notice? I notice who's ever leading the plan is also looking over their shoulder at the next election. How will this affect my majority? How will this affect me at the next election? And some of the plan has been drifted through council political means. So it's not all that we've been listening to the public. Yes, we have. I've been trying to. We needed full engagement. Tonight, I would have loved to have got involved in that amendment, but before 18B. You can't do it now. It's too late, members. You've got to accept what you've got. The responsibility is ours. And if you try and delay it, it's 15 months to put what is on that amendment to get the evidence base, etc., through, which will leave us, I believe, a year exposed to planning by appeal. What we've got is not the best. I'm not sure it's sound, but I've got to go for it because I cannot leave Maidstone Borough a year without a plan. Take responsibility. You've all been there. Don't say at the next election, I didn't vote for it. I will be around there saying they didn't get involved in it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Munford. Can you follow that, Councillor Newton, because you're next on my list.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was very difficult. I didn't realise we had a comedy act tonight. Not impressed. 4 days ago, I received a blue bag that's there. That's the first I've seen of a plan. 4 days ago. Now, why did officers leave that so late for us to look at? And then we're sitting here deciding upon people's future and their properties and their lives. I've in my ward suffered from this at Ottham with all of the buildings along the A2, along the Sutton Road. But who are these houses for that they're likely to build? You said you couldn't afford one, and that's exactly the problem. Young people are the prices of houses along the Sutton Road are very high because people are moving down to this community from London, where they sell houses for £600,000, and come down here and buy them for 450, or a bit more maybe. That's the problem that we're facing. This plan, I don't think is sound, but unfortunately, we've got no choice. Only you people on that side can say, well, you know, we've told you so, but you're in the same boat as every one of us. I'm looking deeper into this. Why did officers leave that pack until 4 days before we're sitting here? I think questions need to be taken back on that. And if it's negligence, I'd like to see this meeting suspended and reconvened in 2 weeks' time, so we've all had a chance to go through those documents. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. And to Councillor Mumford, I'm 73. That's why I can't meet at every meeting. Thank you.
And I'm 74. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find it ironic that I've never spoken before, and tonight I'm going to be the last one to speak, so there's irony there. I've never spoken before in open forum, and I wasn't going to, but I think I will. So it's my belief, rightly or wrongly so, that I hear everyone here, especially the members of the public, and it's my belief that if we don't vote for the local plan, somewhere or another these houses will get built where you don't want them to be. Now, that may be wrong. I could be wrong. It's my belief that they'll be built in Marden. They'll be built everywhere they can do. Now, it's also a fact that I have a new home that I had bought a new home that I was able to buy on a government scheme. I have a son who's autistic that was able to get into the local school. If those houses were not there available to me, a new house subsidised by a government help to buy scheme, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I would then not have had the right school for my son. I enjoy my new home in Ottham that I wouldn't have been able to do without such a government scheme. So I get that it's not perfect. I understand that. I don't get the complexities of it. I see people shaking their head across from me. But we simply need these houses. And I personally wouldn't have been able to have a home if it, one, wasn't a new build, and two, wasn't for such a government scheme.
Right, thank you, Councillor McKenna. Now, councillors, I do think we are now at the time when we need to take the vote on this motion. Yes, Councillor, I can't remember your name.
Pearl. Pearl, yes. Sorry, Madam Mayor. Given what I suspect are the numbers, might I suggest it would be a good idea to have the proverbial recorded vote, just so that we can...
If there are enough of you, by all means, yeah. Let's see you all. Excellent. We are going to have a recorded vote. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. I will now hand over to... Uh-oh. Did you? I will hand over to Mr. McGuinness.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just to confirm that we are voting on all of the recommendations within the papers. Yeah. If I can ask members to be clear whether they're voting for or against when called.
Or abstain.
Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Blackmore.
For.
Councillor Brindle.
Against.
Councillor Bryant.
Against.
Councillor Burton.
For.
Councillor Cannon.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Coates.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Cumming.
For.
Councillor Daly.
Against.
Councillor English.
Against.
Councillor Fissenden.
Against.
Councillor Forecast.
For.
Councillor Fort.
For.
Councillor Garton.
For.
Councillor Gooch.
For.
Councillor Grigg.
Against.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Harwood.
Against.
Councillor Hasty.
Against.
Councillor Hinder.
Against.
Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Joy.
Against.
Councillor Khadkar.
Against.
Councillor Kimmins.
Against.
Councillor Mackay. Councillor McKenna.
For.
Councillor Mortimer.
Against.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Newton.
For.
Councillor Parfitt Reid.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Pohl.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
Against.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Councillor Round. Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor J Sams.
Against.
Councillor T Sams. Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Springett.
For.
Councillor Trubinsky.
For.
Councillor R Webb.
Against.
Councillor S Webb.
For.
Councillor Wiggendine Shepherd. Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, members. The result is that there are 26 in favour, 23 against, no abstentions. The motions are carried. I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Please be upstanding for a motion of the Mayor. Thank you.